All right, let's go back to one of our top stories then, and we're still keeping an eye on what's happening in Gabon. Of course, as Gabon officers declare military coup, deposed Gabonese President Ali Bongo Ondimba has pleaded for help. He has been ousted from power by the military following the recent elections in the country. We are now joined by writer and commentator on African affairs, Ochieno, on the situation then in Gabon. A very good evening to you, sir. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
You're most welcome. All right, so the Gabonese president, as we saw in that clip that's making the rounds, has indeed pleaded for help. He claims to not know what's going on, but we're talking about a man whose family has ruled, for 56 years. Surely he has an idea of what's going on.
It's extraordinary, isn't it? Actually looks rather pathetic, the plea. But of course, as you rightly say again, 56 years is a long time. That's more than treble monarchies on the continent. This is a part of a new wave which is taking place on the continent. Particularly now we may be talking about Sahel, we may be talking about French West Africa, but it's a big shake-up for the African continent. It's a big challenge for the African Union that had threatened to back invasion of Niger. Now, what do they do?
Yeah.
I think quite clearly this evening, I don't know what the big names are thinking about and talk about. President Zuma, President Ramaphosa, the likes of President Ramaphosa. Actually, I take it very seriously because he should really be the leader on the continent at the moment. Nigeria is neither here nor there. Where are the big established African leaders talking about?
Yeah.
Part of this coup is amongst the many that has now been happening on the continent, where military guys are coming in areas where elections have been challenged. Now, Nigeria itself, the biggest African economy, has been challenged, has got a president who now lacks legitimacy, but who ironically is one of those people who's been pushing for military intervention. I think it's a wake-up call for the continent this evening that African leaders need to have urgent summit to begin to look at questions of elections. We should not wait for elections to take place and become sham. Elections to take place so that people die. Opposition to beg for rescue from leaders and neighbors, and then we talk sovereignty. And then when military guys come and take over, meaning they're basically citizens of this country, take over, and then we begin to cry foul. I know some people are talking about question of the new rise on the anti-French sentiments. That is a factor, but it's not the cause. These are underlying issues of the continent where our contemporary leaders, particularly in the last 2 or so decades, have failed to deliver on the basic services. The Gabon shouldn't be going through this. Very rich country, small population.
Not only overstaying, not only having a problem on the continent, but also seems that there's an issue of leaders, overstaying their welcome. And I think that, this is something that we've certainly, whenever we talk about the African continent, there's something that we tend to touch on. Why does this continue to be a problem? Because, this is like a domino effect. The fact that you've been having a family that's in power for so long leads to the fact that they become complacent, leads to the fact that they feel that they're entitled to a country, to lead a country. And it also goes back to, a question I always ask when it comes to this sort of leadership. We always think that liberation movements also need to then automatically transition into being leadership movements, where some might argue, and I've argued certainly, that, maybe that's where they were supposed to end, at being, liberation movements. Because when we get into the leadership point, sometimes it's such a struggle.
I think it's a tricky one, but I think it's rather unfair for liberation movements and liberation political parties. I happen to have voted for one in Uganda People's Congress, the founding independent political party of Milton Obote. Milton Obote himself was deposed by Idi Amin, but Idi Amin was backed by Anglo-America of the West. And at the time, Milton Obote's problem was because he was the head of the anti-apartheid movement, lest you know. And so those leaders did try their level best. But you're right also. When you come to South Africa, Madiba, granted, he was a much older guy, but he provided the leadership exemplarily by serving one term. It could be argued it was part of a deal, whatever the case, you may know slightly much more. But when Madiba did that, I think it was a huge opportunity and a huge lesson for the African continent, particularly those people who were seeing him as the exemplar. to be able to follow suit. But I want to tell you something very quickly. I happen to know it's on record, but not very widely spoken. Milton Obote told Julius Nyerere, apparently, I think 1976 or thereabout, that liberation leaders, or indeed decent African leaders, should leave power when they're still popular. Of course, ironically, Obote returned to Uganda, was re-elected, but again, he was redeposed. Nyerere managed to transit, but that was after a rather long time. But yes, here is where we are. Pluralist politics came in. Now issues of term limits came in. People like the Bongos, we have term limits. Look at Kenya. We have in Uganda term limits, broken up. I'm not quite sure whether we have an alternative to pluralist multi-party politics. Of course, people have been having this conversation. No, I genuinely believe that big African leaders need to emerge and to bang tables at Addis Ababa and to begin to say that, look, when elections are rigged in particular nation states, we will take concerns. When opposition leaders are whipped, we shall take concerns. When citizens disappear in many of these other countries, like when there's talk about Kenya, Uganda, or Congo, we will take concerns as a continent. But the problem is, I don't really see any big name African today. When I look through my history books or some of my early times as a young activist, both here in Uganda, in UK, and across the continent, I really don't see the guys who inspired us 30, 40, or indeed 50 years ago. That is a very worrying time. But maybe some of these things will, as I said at the beginning, not only wake up a section of the continent, particularly now the Sahel sub-region, where people are actually trying to politicize it, to link it with the question of war and terror, link it with perhaps a new element of Cold War, both of which are by and large true.
Let's talk about the generals. Let's talk about the generals. We saw that makeshift press conference that they had. They met to discuss who would lead this particular transition that they want. Are we clear as to what these generals actually want at this time, apart from ousting, of course, the Gabonese president? But what more, apart from wanting Bongo gone, do they want to? Do we have clarity?
No, we don't. And the grievances generally tend to be the same. I can tell you that even Idi Amin's own claimed and found some grounds to be able to push for this. But in their case, they're actually talking about the broken systems, rule of law, and things like that, and seems to be rather sensible. The Nigerian ones, when they came up, they listed some of the things I was trying to talk about. Look, they will cite corruption until there will be evidence there. They'll cite the fact that elections were rigged. There will be evidence. They'll cite state capture, and there will be evidence there. Whatever the case, I am really surprising myself that for the first time in a very long time, I am beginning to give these guys a hearing. I have told other networks, including some of your colleagues, that except for Thomas Sankara, I had really never believed that any military guy could come in and take over power and govern. Now, I can count three. I can count Sankara. I can count late Oyitu Jok, Africa's Lion of War, who amongst others led the getting rid of Idi Amin. And I can count that other one, Chris Hani, that we don't talk about. Now, of course, in his case, we don't know what would have happened. Are these guys designed to govern? No, they're designed to defend our nation states. Whatever happens, I don't know any of them anyway, who moved from military uniforms, took over power, came into, if you like, civilian suits, and basically delivered their nation states. I don't know any on the continent, and I don't think we should depend on that. But like you said much earlier, when I look through the rest of the world, I don't know. I mean, I spent quite a bit of time in the United Kingdom. I don't know in the circumstances in which a relative of a certain prime minister or former prime minister would be considered for those positions very easily. I don't see how these family rule extensions over a 10-year period would be acceptable. I don't even see when there is a political party that has governed over 3 terms, there is a fatigue. Africans just need to wake up. And for me, I'm thinking that as of tonight, maybe African institutions need to have conversations side by side with the leaders at Addis Ababa. We need to begin banging tables and say, no, there is a new conversation that this continent needs to have as far as this question of governance is concerned, meaning therefore that military takeovers like this are mere symptoms.
All right, Joseph Ochieno is a writer and a commentator on African affairs, speaking to us about the situation there in Gabon.